It's time for another round of infinite yapping. The yapping professionals are in the building. Um, Larry's carrying this whole episode. I lied. I won't be yapping. I'm going mute. That's the loudest silence I've ever heard.
What happened?
Nothing. I was just being annoying.
I tried to hold it, but I can't.
I know I let that one out, and then it was over. No, I was just being annoying. Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast, where we're going to do part 2 of. I don't even know what we called it really. Just kind of going over Cutie's Bukharin
in
episode.
the socialist state.
Yeah, and can a socialist state be imperialistic? And Cutie says no. Larry says yes. We'll get to that showdown eventually, and I'll side with whoever's going to give me the most clout. Anyway, how you guys doing?
Tremendous.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I think I'm picking up your AC now.
Yeah, I'm in a different room now, so let me turn it off.
Smiley face.
Yeah, what are you doing with creature comforts like AC? We are suffering for this.
I have my AC on. I can turn it off if you guys hear it.
I can hear it. I switched rooms, so there's an AC right over
Maybe
here.
it's you, Larry, actually. Do they have fans down that bunker?
I also have a fan back there, actually. Let me turn that one off, too. Anyway, Cutie, play us in.
Okay. So last week we talked about imperialism and how as Marxists we intend to define it. How people have kind of a fucked up understanding of what imperialism actually is. It's very, it's a base liberal kind of thing. No, I can't hear it, Ivan. I heard. Yeah. So let me see what the piece was that we read last time, because I can't remember its exact title. It's I think Imperialism in the World Economy. It is. Yeah, it's called Imperialism and World Economy. So basically, we just talked about how Nikolai Bukharin describes imperialism in that. It was a pretty, I guess, fundamental piece of Lenin's imperialism or capitalism, the highest imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't you just say to me that Lenin low-key just copied Bukharin?
Yeah, I'm going to be, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
He copied Hilferding.
Are you telling me these guys didn't have original thoughts? Just like
no, Hilferding really codified the terms monopoly and finance capital, differentiating them from prior free competition, so-called free competition. And really, Lenin, Bukharin, and everybody who came after really was working off of, it was an Austrian Marxist, Rudolf Hilferding. He was really good. Lenin, and I'm not as familiar with Bukharin, but Lenin added to it, of course. But yeah, Lenin more pulled it together as a theory, as like he looked at the work that Hilferding was doing in describing how capitalism had developed and sort of applied it, looked at it and said, okay, this is how it's operating with the various, at his time, it wasn't multinational, but international corporations and how they were interacting with each other with the various nation states backing them, their interests on the global stage, which is all imperialism is. I wasn't here for last week's, but if we understand Lenin's work and what he was doing and what Hilferding was doing before him was just describing the stage of capitalism, the monopoly stage, which is the social relations that go on in between international and today multinational corporations, and again the bourgeois states that back their interests, and the contradictions and often cooperation between the two. It's the series of social relations. It looks like a lot of different things. Sometimes it looks like war. Sometimes it looks like collaboration in order to extract resources. Sometimes it looks like fights and sabotage over, a sole entity or a sole state-backed entity gaining those resources. It can manifest as a lot of things, but when we talk about imperialism, we're talking about the base economic relations, which is essentially just global commodity circulation. So hopefully that's clear.
Yeah.
What about when country invades small country?
Oh, clear imperialism. Absolutely. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Okay.
That is again, like I described, that's often a side effect of those social relations. It's like racism is a side effect of the social relations that, are neocolonialism and capitalism.
Yeah, and like we were just saying on the stream that we came from, that's why you can't ignore those intersectionalities, because those intersectionalities don't exist independent from class. The reason why you have so many marginalized groups of people, in this case, in the settler colony of the United States, who are in the proletariat class, is because black, brown, transgender, gay people, whoever, are marginalized to be put into those positions in the first place. So that's why you can't ignore black, and all those things I just said, and just say the only thing that matters is class. Yes, but why are people in those classes to begin with? Why did the class antagonisms exist to begin with? But
Right.
yeah, I digress. That's a whole other conversation.
Right. Yeah. Why do you get overrepresentation of these marginalized peoples as the lowest part of the class strata? And it's capitalism, but it has particular features here in this neo-colonial settler state that harm others in ways that it leaves others untouched as favored lapdogs of the capitalist class in many ways. People that look like me.
Yeah, right, exactly. And why do those people want to keep their interest, and why do they choose to ignore intersectionality? It's because they're trying to preserve their position within the class society. Even if they don't become bourgeois, at least they'll be better than the other members from their class. Right. But we digress. So Cutie, you want us to jump right into the material? Is there anything else you want to say or yap about real quick?
Not really. I think we can, what the context required will pop up as we read. You know what I mean?
Okay, so we're doing Soviet social imperialism for. Oh no, we did the economic.
Yeah, we'd be doing that one last.
Okay.
So economic structure and then economic organization. I mean, both of them are basically the same thing. But
okay, cool.
I think one of them is a speech, and the other one is like an actual writing.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. I can read first. So, the economic structure of Soviet Russia, March 21st, 1922. The form of our economic life now coming to an existence is commonly designated by the term state capitalism. Our economic conditions are, however, so complicated that they cannot possibly be covered by one single term. Besides, the term state capitalism has not, in the literature of political economy, the signification which our Russian literature has lately assigned to it. In the following essay, I shall try to treat the problem of different economic forms of existing or developing in our country. So this is how you can see right here that Bukharin was basically a YouTube video essayist, because he ended it with in the following essay, like just 100% like 8th grade. We're making a YouTube video. I will talk about the class antagonisms in Kirby's Dreamland. Okay. Enterprises of the proletariat state. These comprise the enterprise nationalized by the proletariat state. They are the state monopolies, but they are not state capitalist monopolies. Since in the case of the state capitalist monopoly, the bourgeois that constitutes itself as the power, Marx is the owner of the enterprises. With us, however, the working class is the owner of the nationalized enterprise. The forms of production being characterized according to the forms of property, it is evident that enterprise owned by a worker state must not be designated as state capitalism. On the other hand, such enterprises are not yet socialist productive units in the strict sense of the word, as the socialist form of economy, of course, based on a thorough and rigidly exercised systematization of the whole productive process. With us, however, and particularly under the conditions of the new economic policy, systematization as compared with the adaptation to the conditions of the market is of minor importance. The fact that the enterprise is being carried on capitalist principles of private property, payment of wages, production of a considerable part of the products of the market, does not make the enterprise a capitalist one as far as the conditions of property are concerned. All right, what do you boys think of that?
I would partly disagree with it, but as a whole, I would call it a necessary step. Like, this was something that I don't think they need to be justifying it. Like, that this is or isn't capitalist. This is part of the process that they needed to go through in order to build socialism, because capitalism was severely underdeveloped in the Soviet Union, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's participating in, like, I suppose, like, capitalist relations, and
Yeah.
the state, in a sense, is the acting capitalist, right? But
Yeah,
it's not state capitalist in the sense that, like, you know, the capitalists have taken over the state. Like, it's not a bourgeois state. It's a state of the proletariat, where it's, I guess, sort of like cyclical in the sense that it's the proletariat being the capitalist of themselves, if you know what I mean, because they do own the firm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Enterprise of mixed character. These compromise those concerns in which the proletariat, state, and capitalist groups are partners. In these so-called mixed enterprises, part of the shares is owned by the proletariat state. The rest may be owned by Russian or foreign capitalists. It is evident that such mixed enterprises are neither state capitalistic nor purely capitalistic enterprises. The capitalists and the state are their owners at the same time. The worker state will receive part of the surplus value produced in these enterprises. The rest goes to the capitalist partner. In the course of the general economic development, an incessant contest for domination will be carried on in these concerns. With the increase of the economic power of the proletariat, the participation of a capitalist group will become of less importance, provided we avoid making blunders, and the state will, in a constantly growing degree, determine and conduct the whole process of development of these enterprises, similar to that exercised by the great banking concerns and trust in their control of numbers or joint stock companies in the capitalist state. Now, just like when I read that and I read about foreign capitalist partner, for me, Cutie, that rings some alarm bells. I'm kind of not.
Yeah.
Kind of don't like that. Kind of don't fuck with that.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I thought, particularly, this would be good for the next part when we're talking primarily about China, and also towards the end of the episode when we're talking about, the USSR and some of these mouse yapping about Afghanistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this circumstance here, there are obviously it's a means of getting capital into the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And no means a permanent solution. Unfortunately, there is obviously, as you said, a blunder that can occur that ends up allowing your party to become captured by said capitalists and foreign capitalists.
Yeah. And this, you know,
One of
like
the
these,
big parts of that would cause that blunder would be allowing capitalists into your party. Know what I mean?
right,
And not being
and
really strict about receiving, money from foreign capitalists.
right, and in this case, the mixed enterprises that they had here during this time period, this is very early into the new economic policy. Um, it was sort of hit or miss, I think, as a general overall assessment. And it wasn't something that they blunt like. This was not something that caused problems later down the line at all.
Yeah.
So this was brought to a pretty solid conclusion. Within 5-6 years of its implementation. So this is something like definitely like we shouldn't view this as, oh my God, they were opportunists right off the bat. This is something where it was done out of necessity, or maybe not even out of necessity. Maybe there was class interest pushing for this, and it was a compromise. But it was something that didn't turn into a blunder. It turned into something that they were able to wrap up. So it's good to notice these things as like potential threats. Threat assessment to what's going on when you're building socialism, but like just because something is of a threat or a concession doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to result in a blunder.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can get like you in the NEP one that he has. I think we'll probably read about it another time, or we could try to read it tonight if we have time. He talks about kind of like the class interests of the peasants and how a lot of them were artisans.
Yeah.
And in ABCs of Communism, also he talks about how artisans effectively are almost like primordial capitalists. You know what I mean? They're the petty bourgeoisie where they make their own shit. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
They
Small
can
producers,
they sell it.
yeah.
They sell it for a profit, and particularly with the peasants in Ukraine, they would make clothing
Right.
while they were on their off. You know what I mean? They would sell that to the workers in the factories.
Mhm.
So, especially since we just got out of a civil war, and all these people now have political education and understand that what a peasant's class interest is and how that might actually be antagonistic for the proletariat. It might be pertinent to give these artisans and these really small capitalists an economic concession, so they don't start up a second civil war immediately after it ends. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you throw them a bone, and then your economy might get better because everybody's the capitalists are trying to invest in and make their own money or whatever, and there might be foreign capitalists that come in and throw some money in to meet some sort of input that they need to fill. You know what I mean? And now when you nationalize it later, now you have the thing that they need anyway, so they're gonna still buy it from you regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you give a little concession so you don't get overthrown in the first 3 years of your revolution happening. Know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's the level of like Mao would call this a non-antagonistic contradiction at this level, where it's something like you said, a concession, but it's going to down the line, as we see within a decade here, it becomes an antagonistic contradiction when we go to collectivize these artisans and peasants. And like I think it's also useful to just because people say, well, these guys work for a living, so aren't they working class? They're not strictly exactly proletariat.
Yeah.
The proletariat socially reproduces themselves by selling their labor to a capitalist. The small producer, the peasant, artisan, socially reproduces themselves by working on something, a product that they are going to sell. They more or less own their own means of reproduction. Now, how do they get it? Yes, they wind up usually having to acquire goods and services from a capitalist, but they have a different level of alienation of their labor. They have a different relation to the means of production than a proletariat will. Doesn't mean that they're not allies. Like generally, they're going to mostly be allies until we get to that process of collectivization in a decade.
Right.
And like the reading from before, like we did last week, where he made kind of a distinction between the town and the countryside. The countryside is peasants and aristocrats, landowners. You know what I mean? Peasants, they produce food. They give a portion of that food to the landlord, and the landlord might give them, some sort of some tools. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, the peasant is the one who ends up owning those tools effectively. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're not alienated from their labor in the sense that a proletariat in in the town would be,
Yeah.
because
They
they're
make
working,
something, it leaves,
they're working
and they
as
never.
as
Yeah.
almost always a small portion of a machine. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're a part of a machine. They're not, the producer itself. If you know what I mean,
Right.
they're one of many producers on a single product over the course of a day, and it may be thousands of that same product. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the product can be a service too. We can relate that to
Yeah.
today's in the United States.
Yeah,
A service is a commodity. Just in case
Yeah.
some goofball tries to say they're not, service is a commodity. It's part of the commodification process, and you're
Yeah.
alienated labor if you work as a cashier or any kind of service-based industry is just the same. As someone who extracted a raw material or put a piece in a machine, part of that process. So
Mm-hmm.
And like, service workers may at one point technically not been proletariat, but they've been 100% proletarianized by this point.
for a long
A
time,
wage,
yes,
they're working for a capitalist.
yes,
They're one part of a process. They're not making the coffee. You know what I mean? Like, they're not getting the coffee and then getting everything set up and then making it. Like, they're not going out farming for it. You know what I mean? They're just one step of the overall productive process to get you the good that you want.
exactly.
The only difference is that instead of you being, the person who puts this piece onto, onto the engine, right? Being the one person who puts this piece onto the engine for hours of the day, they are the person who, makes the coffee, puts it in the cup, gives you the coffee. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're not like, really the only separation is that they're not in the exact same building. The whole process isn't happening in the same place.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
Good analysis, boys.
Okay.
Concessionaire and leased enterprises. With regards to fundamental conditions of property in this group, the worker state is the owner. Still, not all means of production in these enterprises are held by it, as the concessionaries and lessees can increase their production apparatus by means of independent transactions, by importation of machinery, construction of new factories, and can thus become owners of a part of the same. In most cases, however, the original investment will be owned by the worker state. Here, too, the surplus value produced will be divided into two parts, and the class struggle will find expression in the changeable amount of these shares. Private capitalist enterprise under the control of the proletariat state. These compromised capitalist concerns is the true sense of the word, i.e., concerns exclusively owned by groups of capitalists or by a single capitalist. The development of these concerns will be regulated more or less from without, i.e., through the state banks and the credit system by the way of circulation of money. Before we go on, as somebody who hasn't grappled with a ton of economic Marxist theory, I do appreciate it, and I'm glad we're doing this because, as we were talking about, we were just talking about this on the stream. So Larry, I mentioned part of our conversation on the stream we just came from, where we were talking about how people don't really actually reconcile or what's the word I'm looking for? Get a hold of Marxism, and they kind of just end up with these goofball takes. And if you don't, you can understand the social relations, you can understand the class antagonisms, but you're never really going to truly grasp the whole picture if you don't try to wrestle with this nitty gritty economic stuff, because that is what capitalism is. Yes, we can say, oh, well, capitalism is XYZ. Capitalism makes these problems, but you have to understand how.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the boring part. Nobody's going to disagree with that, but it's fundamental. It's something you don't have to become an economics expert, but you just have to grasp the logic of capital. you have to understand the basics of what Marx was talking about at the heart of this. Like, you have to get a basic grasp of fundamentals, so you can know. I mean, like, if you're going to be someone who's organizing the community, you know what the fuck you're talking about, right? You can't just, people are going to come to you with questions, and you're just, oh, well, our capitalism is when rich people. Oh,
Right.
Okay. All right. You're not gonna be as useful as an organizer if you don't have a solid grasp of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right. Petite bourgeois units of production and their consolidation. To this class belong the productive units of the home producers, so-called custaries. How do you say that?
Custaris.
Custars.
Custaris.
Okay. It sounds like we don't know. All right, Kutsarts, the artisans and peasants, which are the strongest foundation for the development of purely bourgeois capitalist conditions.
There you go. That's what I'm saying.
These
He
productive
said it here.
units recruit themselves from the elements of pre-capitalist barter economy. These are particularly found in our eastern districts. Of course, the freedom of production under the basic conditions of the existence of the innumerable petty bourgeois productive units will inevitably bring about the enlargement of the sphere of capitalist conditions and the gradual strengthening of those important capitalist groups that are capable of competition within the enterprises of the purely governmental type and those of the mixed type. These are the principal forms of production existing in the Soviet Republic. It is necessary here to deal with another extremely important problem. Russian economy, considered as a whole, finds itself in the world market face to face with big capitalist systems. This gives rise to the following situation. The conditions of the world market may cause a part of the surplus value produced by the Russian economic system, pure state enterprises included, to find its way in one form or another into the pockets of the bourgeois abroad. Payments to other countries, losses in international exchange of goods in consequence of weakness of our social economic position. It may thus seem that even those enterprises that are exclusively held by the workers will produce part of the surplus value lost to the working class. This circumstance, which exists owing to the temporary weak position of Russia in a world trade, is by no means a proof of capitalist characters of our state industry. This circumstance serves to show once more that the development of our economic system is at the same time a singular form of class struggle. In Russia, this struggle is going on in the form of competition between state and private enterprise, of a contest for the best terms and contracts or concessions and leases for the size of shares and the products for power in the mixed enterprises and for the best position in the good markets and credit, etc.
Maybe we pause here.
Yeah.
So you can get a second to breathe.
Yeah, so basically, if I'm understanding correctly, basically Bukharin is saying that even in a purely state-owned enterprise, just by the very nature of the nation itself participating in some kind of trade, if that trade is happening within or facilitated by a state-owned enterprise, that loss of, let's say, exchange value, if it's somehow making some other bourgeois richer or some other working class person elsewhere poorer, that in itself does not constitute that they are participating in capitalism. If I got that correctly.
Yeah, I would say maybe in like the strict sense of the word, he means capitalism, and probably in reality he's, I guess, referring a lot more to like imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
At least imperialism of poor people abroad, and he's probably talking a little bit more about how like they're still being, despite being, state held, these being state held firms or majority state held firms or firms that are under the supervision of the state, that because they still live in a capitalist world and because they still need things from abroad that they can't necessarily produce at home or don't have the capacity to produce at home or aren't able to produce yet, that they're still being imperialized. You know what I mean? That it's not like the revolution is over, like they've won. You know what I mean? Like there's still, like you said, there's still a prolonged class struggle that they're working out, and that one of the ways that they do this, I suppose, is by I guess, playing into it to a certain extent to kind of like pull out later with a W. You know what I mean?
Right.
There was just it's part of the the dialectics of the entire situation of the Russian Revolution after this period is that you're engaged in not only internal class struggle of the Soviet republics, and now also still involved in the international class struggle against the um, capitalist markets, the capitalist world, who still was, the Soviet Revolution was victorious. Several others, the Finnish, the German, had not become victorious. Hungarian. So it was still a imperialist capitalist world where you were going to have to contend with that.
Yeah, I guess that like you won the physical revolution, you know what I mean? But like there's still an economic war being waged against the proletariat, and especially the proletariat of your country. You know what I mean? So it's almost like the state is there to manage this as much as possible without being so aggressive against capitalism to the point where it causes another civil war to occur. You know what I mean? Particularly with the peasants, because you already saw that with the Kronstadt rebellion. You know what I mean? It was a bunch of peasant boys that got pissed off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right. In world industry, this contest is carried out on a struggle for the most profitable contracts, duties, loan conditions, special contracts, etc. The part of the surplus value going to the proletariat state will inevitably grow in the course of our economy. In the case of failure in the contest, the claim of the internal and external capitalist groups will reduce the claims of the working class to nil. The West European literature of political economy understands by state capitalism, the highest form of capitalism, the means of production being held by the bourgeois state. The most perfect and most powerful organization of the capitalist class. It is unnecessary to say that our state capitalism is altogether different from the one characterized above. Of course, our economic system can be changed into the true state capitalism. If the class struggle in the sphere of direct process of production in the political sphere results in the loss of power by the working class, this question will be solved by the result of the class struggle, and we have sufficient reason to believe that in consequence of the crisis of the capitalist world economy, it will not end in favor of the capitalist groups.
Poor guy. So I really like what he's saying here, because he's getting to the heart of Marxism. He's saying that, yes, we've consolidated, like through necessity, they built state capitalism in a socialist society. Because Lenin saw and I think the party as a whole saw the state capitalist as the least antagonistic to what they were trying to build and the easiest to manage. But he says here that this can be reversed and we can go back to being the old form of state capitalism should the class struggle be lost externally and or internally. And of course, unfortunately, internally, 70 years later, it was lost within.
Right.
Actually, quite a bit earlier, but the fruits of that loss weren't felt fully until 70 years later.
Of course, our economic system. Oh no, I just read that one, right? Yeah. In the event of the great historical strife being decided in favor of the proletariat, the capitalist groups inserted into our system of economy will objectively have played the part of the capitalist expert, and against their will, they will have worked in the favor of the working class. The multiplicity of the economical forms in our republic is one of the fundamental influences of our economic life, and has always been to taken into consideration. Therefore, in treating the question of the part to be played by the trade unions under the conditions of a new economic policy, one has to consider before all variety of our economic forms. It is evident that the tasks and the methods of the trade unions are dependent on the kind of economic form in the same way as the forms of enterprise vary in many ways from proletariat state enterprises. The task of the trade union varies from its specially organizational part in the state factories up to the strike funds and strikes in private capitalist enterprises. The growing multiplicity of the economic form determines the growing multiplicity of the tasks of the unions. What do you think about that ending, Larry?
I like it.
Nice.
Summed it up.
Early
Summed it up
Bukharin
nicely.
was almost always cooking. It was really just
Mhm.
tail end that things were not cooking.
Nobody does nothing but hits their whole career. Not everybody's Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Not everybody's collected every episode.
Not everybody.
I disagree. On Tom Hanks, I think you're wrong on that one, Larry. Because I saw Pinocchio. I saw the new Pinocchio movie with Tom Hanks.
How it was not.
That was not a hit.
Mm.
The only hit that happened was like me falling on the floor trying to hang myself. Like,
Well, then it just proves
It
my
was-
point. There's
it
not
was
everybody's
awful.
gonna have their hits.
Right.
it was maybe
Everyone
the
falls
worst,
off.
one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Actually, was that.
Oh my
that
God.
Tom
Is
Hanks
that
movie.
bad?
That's not good. That is not
It
good.
was actually shocking. Like, I tried my hardest, but it couldn't be done.
That's a shame. Poor Tom.
And Cobra Commander, we're talking about Bukharin, not Bakunin. Common misconception.
I had to turn the AC back on because it's getting hot as fuck in here. So we're just gonna have to deal while someone else reads.
I'm gonna clear my throat, so I mean, if you guys want me to read and be,
I'll read the next one. What are we on?
Let me. So, economic organization. It's low key a copy paste of this. It's just a little bit more, I guess, in speech format.
Okay.
So
Alright.
there's always context that you can get in here.
Yeah.
Context that you get, know what I mean?
Okay. So this is pretty much the same. But anyway, I'll go a little faster through this one.
Yeah, we can just.
People usually call the economic system now evolving in Russia state capitalism. Our economic relations, however, are so complex that they cannot be embraced in a single concept. The idea state capitalism, moreover, does not have the same meaning in literature of political economy that it has recently assumed in Russia. I propose to describe, therefore, the different economic forms that are now developing in our country. Enterprises of the proletarian government. These embrace the enterprises nationalized by the proletarian government. They are a state monopoly. However, they are not state capitalist monopolies, since in the case of the latter, the bourgeoisie as controllers of the government would be the true owners of the enterprise. In our case, the working classes are the owners of nationalized undertakings. Since forms of production are characterized by ownership, it is perfectly clear that we cannot designate enterprises belonging to a laboring man's government as the state capitalist undertakings. On the other side, these enterprises are not socialist units of production in the strict sense of the word. For a socialist economy, it goes without saying, assumes a complete and harmonious system of production and distribution. In Russia, however, especially under the conditions amid which we are now working, a systematic and harmonious plan of production, accommodated to the consumptive demands of the country, is of minor significance. The circumstances that our undertakings copy the methods of capitalist enterprises, pay wages, sell their products to the market, do not make them capitalist so far as ownership is concerned. Okay, mixed enterprises. These include undertakings partly owned by the proletarian government and partly by private capitalists. In these so-called mixed enterprises, part of the shares belong to the government. The other part may belong to foreign or Russian owners. It is perfectly clear that such mixed enterprises are neither state enterprises, state industries, nor purely capitalist industries. Both capitalists and the workers' government own stock in them. The workers' government receives part of the profits, the private investors receive the remainder. In the course of the future history of such undertakings, there will be a constant struggle between the government and the private owners to control them. As the proletariat becomes more competent to administer industry, the importance of private ownership will decline. If we make no blunders, the government will acquire a growing share of these undertakings in the same way in which a capitalist country, great banks and trusts control a vast number of smaller undertakings. Concessions and leased enterprises. As a rule, enterprises of this class belong to the workers' government. However, this is not necessarily the case, for the owners of concessions and leaseholders may import machinery, erect new buildings, and otherwise add to and extend their plants, and thus become owners of a part of them. However, in a majority of cases, the new capital will be furnished by the workers' government. In this instance, also, the profits will be divided into two parts. The fluctuations of the class struggle will be recorded in the relative shares of the workers' government and of the private investors in this profit. Private enterprises regulated by the proletarian government. These are private enterprises in the strict sense of the word. Enterprises whose only owner is a capitalist or a group of capitalists. The growth of such enterprises will be regulated more or less by the national bank, the national credit system, the national currency, and by direct legislation of the proletarian government.
Sorry, I feel so bad. We probably should have just started with the small private shops part. Because that's why I remember I wanted this one, was because this is a difference. This is actually a difference between the two. I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna say, like, this is word for word. I know I read through these both and thinking they were similar, but I forgot about this bottom part is where it goes. Yeah, okay. Let's forget that I said all that stuff again. Small private shops and groups of such shops. These include little economic units, small producers, mechanic shops, and peasant industry, which are the subsoil from which private capital springs. These businesses contain all the elements of the pre-capitalist period. This is particularly true of those in our eastern border territory. Naturally, freedom of trade, assuming the presence of a relatively large number of independent producers, will inevitably lead to an extension of capitalist production and the gradual formation of important groups of capitalists, which will be in a position to compete with purely state enterprises and enterprises of the mixed type mentioned above. These are roughly all the forms of production at present existing in the territory of the Soviet government. So we kind of covered that the small producers, even though in the last one, but these are who they were talking about. Okay. I cannot leave the subject here without referring to a question of immense importance. Russia's whole economic structure, viewed as a unit, faces the world market, great capitalist systems. This creates the following situation. Conditions of the world market may cause part of the excess value created in Russia, that created by strictly government enterprises, to flow into the pockets of foreign bourgeoisie. Payments that we have to make to foreign governments and losses that we must incur in consequence of the weakness of our whole social organization when we deal with other countries will take this form. Apparently, therefore, even enterprises that are exclusively in the hands of the working people will have to yield part of their profits to others. This situation, due to Russia's temporarily weak position in the world economy, is absolutely no proof that our government industry has a capitalist character. It merely proves that our processes of economic evolution are also steps forward in the class struggle. In Russia, this battle has taken the form of competition for more liberal concessions and leases, of a struggle to increase production and obtain a share of real control that private owners have in the undertakings of the mixed type. Abroad, however, this struggle manifests itself as a contest for advantageous commercial treaties, tariffs, loans, conditions, and bargains between individual firms and state enterprises in Russia and private firms abroad. However, the share of workers' governments will take of the excess value produced by the industries of Soviet Russia is bound to grow. But in case we are defeated in the class struggle, capitalists at home and abroad will reduce the share of the working man to nothing. The economic literature of Western Europe conceives that state capitalism as the higher form of capitalism in the hands of bourgeois government, as the most complete and powerful organization conceivable of the capitalist classes. Naturally, our state capitalism is diametrically opposite to this, but naturally, too, the kind of state capitalism we have in Russia can easily be converted into the kind of state capitalism conceived under bourgeois government in the case of the laboring classes lose their power in Russia. We are confident, however, this will not occur. That makes me cry because it did occur. If the proletariat wins this long and arduous battle, the most capable groups of capitalists will have served during this period of incubation of the new economic system as capitalist experts, and thus against their will, they will have labored for the benefit of the working class. The great diversity of enterprises in the Soviet Republic is characteristic of our economic life at present and must be constantly kept in mind.
Bar for bar.
There was a few different sentences, but yeah. Either way, it was a good
Sorry,
sum up.
Larry,
In case anybody missed the first part.
There we go. All right. No, it literally was bar for bar. I don't really have anything else. I don't have anything to say. I think you just wanted us to read more Bukharin. You were like, this piece cooks so much.
No, it's. I think what it was is, whenever I read this, I usually only read one of them, so I always forget that they're the same thing, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'll suffer through and I'll read the long one here.
All right, little mama.
Do you have any extra things to say on the last two texts? Because we're about to go into Maoists complaining about the USSR and doing, Sino-Soviet split, third world brainworm jargon.
Brainworm, you say? No,
I don't know. The Maoist third worldism is actually it's genuinely awful. I'm going to be so honest. Outside of that, Maoists are usually chill, but like the ones that are third worldists, yikes.
Yeah, this one. This was before we get into this. As someone who leans definitely more into the anti-revisionist Maoist strata of communists, this was a very popular thing in the time during the 60s and especially into the 70s, where Maoists had basically the Sino-Soviet split had happened, and there were actually people that thought that as we'll see later on in this, that the Soviet Union, by engaging in opportunism and more class collaboration, they had moved. By this time, after Khrushchev, they had moved away from building socialism, and they were towards the long road of restoring capitalism. Right. It was still a struggle. The outcome wasn't determined ultimately, but it was clear which direction it was headed, which a lot of people were correctly able to assess. But in making these assessments, they incorrectly started going ham on this theory that the Soviets were the worst imperialists and more nefarious than the United States and the NATO folks. Complete misread of this situation. Complete insanity, quite frankly. So, proceed.
Take it away, Cutie Pie.
I think just keep in mind while we're reading this that there were Maoists who ended up low-key siding with the Mujahideen.
Brother.
Hence one of the reasons why I think that this is kind of, goofy. But I'm not going to,
that one
be too hard on this just yet.
Yeah, that one was. We'll get to Afghanistan after this, but there was a mix of things there, because it was not mostly Maoist. It was the People's Republic of China by 1981 that had supported the Mujahideen.
It was both, actually. It was both. Like there was like an actual like Maoist.
There was a Maoist group. There were Maoist groups that were fighting against the Soviets for sure in Afghanistan. Yeah. But anyway, let's continue.
Let me find where I've got this opened up. Okay. This is Soviet Social Imperialism and the International Situation Today by Igor Quinn. And it goes, pivotal to understanding the world situation today is grasping the nature of the Soviet Union. Is it an ally of national independence, national liberation, and revolution, or is it its mortal enemy? Do we extol the Soviet Union as an example of socialism or expose it as a fascist and imperialist superpower?
Oh, brother.
Getting together's stand on these questions is holy moly, unequivocal. There we go. The Soviet Union, once ruled by the proletariat, is now under the rule of a monopoly capitalist class that has fully restored capitalism. The Soviet Union is fascist at home and social imperialist abroad. Socialist in words and imperialist in deeds. It is a superpower and contends it is a superpower and contends with the US for domination of the world. Everywhere, the Soviet social imperialists are enemies of the masses, of the people. In this editorial, we wish to outline our view of the Soviet Union as a capitalist superpower, the significance of this development for the people of the world, and finally, the tasks for the Marxist-Leninist movement in the U.S. on this question. How are we feeling on this one so far? What are we thinking?
I already hit you with the old brother.
Yeah, the point of contention, they were certainly not a capitalist superpower yet. In fact, they never became a capitalist superpower. They got reduced to a shell of their former selves when capitalism was fully restored. But yeah.
Probably what I'll do is I'll stop after every 2 or 3 paragraphs. And
Yeah,
then
sounds good.
we can yap for a second.
Hopefully, it'll start tweaking out by then.
I'll probably start tweaking out. I mean,
I will say I'm familiar with this magazine Getting Out. It was a publication that was circulating in New York amongst mostly Maoist Chinese expats in New York at the time, and I think San Francisco.
Yeah, it was. Well, the eWork when I did like a little bit of background research, they were started actually at Columbia, like Columbia University. So they have. How did the Soviet? I gotta close you out. You gotta stop typing. You gotta stop.
Sorry, brother.
Bro. It's popping up too much. It's gonna give me a stroke.
Right.
How did the Soviet Union become an imperialist superpower? From the victory of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1915 to the 1950s, the people of the Soviet Union, under the leadership of their Communist Party, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, CPSU, led by first V.I. Lenin and then by Joseph Stalin, made momentous strides in building the first workers' state. The Soviet people set a shining example to the world of what economic, political, cultural, and moral progress the laboring people can make when they throw off their exploiters and establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. The Soviet people and the CPSU valiantly defended socialism and fought against the many attempts of international capitalism to overthrow or subvert the Soviet Union. Right after the revolution, the capitalist powers invaded Russia in an attempt to destroy socialism. But all the various attempts of the imperialists failed. The most outstanding example of that. Oh, okay. The most outstanding example is that of the successful Soviet resistance against Nazi aggression in World War II. At the same time that the Soviet people defended socialism from external imperialist aggression, they conducted a sharp battle against an even more dangerous enemy, the revisionists. Capitalist elements under Marxist words represented a moral threat right within socialism. Their objective, like that of foreign imperialists, was to overthrow the dictatorship of the proletariat and restore capitalism. The battle between the two roads, that of socialism or that of capitalism, is not decided once and for all with the overthrow of the rule of the former exploiting class, but rather remains throughout the entire historical period of socialism. So far, we're not doing bad. They're doing okay.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, nothing crazy.
No, this is all uncontroversial.
Yeah, basically. It's like they were trying to, get me into it. So later, when they said the crazy shit, I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? The CPSU scored major victories against the revisionists to keep the socialist road. Trotsky was soundly defeated as a whole pack of careerists, opportunists, bureaucrats, and self-seekers. These bourgeois elements were right within the party and government and aimed to restore capitalism within the Soviet Union, or in the Soviet Union. In 1945, the Soviet Union emerged triumphant from the Second World War, and it was in a position of unprecedented strength. However, certain circumstances arose which facilitated the rise and eventual triumph of revisionism in the CPSU. Under these conditions, the Socialist Soviet Union turned into its opposite, a monolithic capitalist state. The external source of revisionism in the Soviet Union was the surrender to imperialist pressure, while the internal source of revisionism was the existence of bourgeois influence. These are the political and ideological sources of the new bourgeois elements. Externally, the U.S. imperialists threatened nuclear blackmail of the Soviet Union, invoking the fear of atomic destruction. At the same time, the U.S. imperialists promoted reformist illusions that capitalism could be peacefully transformed. Capitulation to these pressures leads to a general abandonment of revolutionary ideals and principles. Within the Soviet Union, the revisionists took advantage of the death of Stalin, who had led many fights against revisionism in the Soviet Union. In 1953, these revisionist elements inevitably emerged under socialism. The revisionists and bureaucrats in the government, careerists in the party, unreformed bourgeois intellectuals and technicians, corrupt administrators, militarists in the armed forces are produced. Okay, militarists in the armed forces are produced because of the remaining inequalities of socialism that are inherited from bourgeois society. These inequalities exist right in the economic basis of socialism, in the areas of ownership relations among people and distribution. There still exists bourgeois right, which gives certain material privileges to some. New capitalist elements are engendered from the soil of bourgeois rights. I'm gonna take a second, take a little sippy.
So that paragraph was virtually perfect. Virtually perfect description of what class struggle looks like while building socialism. The paragraph before that, the external source of revisionism in the Soviet Union was surrender to imperialism. That was nonsense. That whole thing was nonsense.
Yeah.
That the Khrushchev. Now, certainly, I'm not arguing that the U.S. threatened nuclear blackmail, but that's not what led Khrushchev and that clique to pursue peaceful development. They wanted peaceful development because they were liberals. Like they thought they were idealists and liberals. They didn't think that they were going to restore capitalism. They thought they were going to build communism by doing capitalism. You know, this is the problem with the right deviationists is they have, rather than understanding Marx as a history of class struggle, they put all their emphasis on economic determinism. And that is a huge mistake, even though I hate that it's the trots that usually bring up economic determinism today. Gramsci is someone who is reliable and will talk about the same subject. Basically, they they're more sock dems. They're reformists. They thought that peaceful cooperation with the West would allow them to develop their economy at such a fast rate. Everyone's cool. We got control of the state. We can keep doing commodities as long as we want, and we're going to reach communism by, as Khrushchev wound up saying, by 1982, the year I was born. Well, something else altogether happened. So we can go on.
I gotta check where I'm at here because I had to exit out what I was looking at for a second.
Yeah, the elements found in their political.
Okay. Holy moly, that's a big quote I'm about to pull up on. I saw that and I was like, and it's in tiny letters. Damn. These elements found their political representative in the person of Khrushchev, who by 1956 launched an all-out offensive against socialism and the dictatorship of the proletariat. He attacked the record of Stalin and the whole history of socialism in the Soviet Union in order to overturn the advances made by the working people. He promotes the theories of the state of the whole people and party of the whole people to destroy the workers' state and committee of the CPSU, who were elected at its 19. Oh, bro, I just skipped the whole
You
line.
skipped the line.
That's correct. I know.
I think that
To
stream is catching up to you, bro.
destroyed the workers' state and the Workers' Party. Led by Khrushchev, the revisionists soon took over the entire leadership of the party. Quote, nearly 70% of the members of the Central Committee of the CPSU, who were elected at its 19th Congress in 1952, were purged in the course of the 20th and 22nd Congresses held respectively in 1956 and 1961. And nearly 50% of the members of the Central Committee who were elected at the 20th Congress were purged at the time of the 22nd Congress. End quote. On Khrushchev's phony communism, Peking, 1964.
That was written by Mao on Khrushchev's phony communism.
I think we're going to get to it in a second, actually.
Oh, yeah. We are.
That's what that big quote is. The triumph of revisionism in the Soviet Union, the seizure of state power by the revisionists, means that the bourgeoisie controls state power and not the proletariat. And what do the revisionists do with state power in their hands? They restore capitalism in an all-round way. I don't know why I had like a stroke with that one sentence for no reason.
I don't know.
I had more complicated sentences before then. Mao Zedong has incisively summarized the experience and drawn a very important lesson on the dictatorship of the proletariat. He said as early as 1963, class struggle, the struggle for production and scientific experiment are the three great revolutionary movements for building a mighty socialist country. These movements are a sure guarantee that communists will be free from bureaucracy and immune against revisionism and dogmatism, and will forever remain invincible. They are a reliable guarantee that the proletariat will be able to unite with the broad working masses and realize a democratic dictatorship. If, in the absence of these movements, the landlords, rich peasants, counter-revolutionaries, bad elements, and ogres ogres of all kinds are allowed to crawl out, while our cadres were to shut their eyes to all this, in many cases fail even to differentiate between enemy and ourselves, but were to collaborate with the enemy and become corrupted and demoralized, if our cadres were thus dragged into the enemy camp or the enemy were able to sneak into our ranks, and if many of our workers, peasants, and intellectuals were left defenseless against both the soft and hard tactics of the enemy, then it would not take long perhaps only several years or a decade, or several decades at most, before a counter-revolutionary restoration on the national scale inevitably occurred. The Marxist-Leninist Party would undoubtedly become a revisionist party or a fascist party, and the whole of China would change its color. From Khrushchev's Phony Communism, page 72.
So to sum up Mao, watch out for ogres.
Yes.
Ogres are the enemies of capitalism, as everyone knows. Or the enemies of
Now
communism.
confirmed anti-Shrek action.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, that's it's a lot as typical with Mao, it's a lot of
Commas.
lot of commas, a lot of very.
That was like the world's longest run-on sentence too.
Yeah,
that whole thing was 2 sentences. I just want to point that out to everybody.
A lot of verbose language to say that that was one of the great discoveries of the experience of the Chinese Revolution is that class struggle, and the Chinese Revolution learned from the Soviet Revolution as well, that class struggle does not end when the revolution's won. It continues on and on until the relations of production are fully socialist. And in the meantime, those people interested in not building socialism are going to be the people that ruin this for everyone. It's class struggle.
Welcome. All right. I am Tai, so I want to read so I can focus on what we're doing.
It's about to escalate here really soon.
Yeah, this is where I'm gonna start fucking tweaking out, brother. So
all right, here we go.
You're reading it, not me, because I would just stop.
This part is not so bad, but the next section is gonna get really crazy.
All right. The Soviet Union today is not the red color of revolution, but is counter-revolutionary through and through. At home, there is a state monopoly capitalism. Brezhnev openly advocates operating on the profit motive. He proclaims the Soviet capitalists should allocate each ruble to the place where we can be compensated by 2, 3, and even 10 rubles tomorrow. All of us, from the central to local organizations, must learn the complex art of money making. That is nothing to be ashamed of. Brezhnev on basic problems, the CPSU economic policy at the present state. The salaries of the managers and the big enterprises are 15 to 20 times higher than those of average workers.
I hate Brezhnev.
Wage slavery prevails in the Soviet. Bro, get your money up. Wage slavery prevails in the Soviet and is legally authorized and enforced. The regulations, that's what he said. The regulations governing socialist state productive enterprises published recently in the Soviet Union openly stipulates that a manager of an enterprise has the right to recruit and dismiss personnel and has the right to fix the workers' rate of wages and bonuses. This is unabashed confession that wage labor is brought and sold by the Soviet Union today. There is widespread unemployment, as with any capitalist society. It is reported that there has been 6 million industrial workers without jobs every year since 1970. There is an increasing taxation. In 1960, state employees paid an average 84 rubles in taxes. This increased to 158 rubles by 1973. According to Soviet yearbooks, the retail prices are also soaring. For example, between the years 1970 to 73, state retail prices of meat, poultry rose 29%, animal oils by 28%, vegetables by 23%, and flour by 48%. These are all common characteristics of capitalist society. In order to serve its imperialist ambitions, there we go, the new capitalists in the Soviet Union have militarized the economy. 60% of industry is directly or indirectly related to the military. In 1960, the Soviet revisionists spent 13.1% of its national income on military expenditures, but by 1974, this had increased to 19.6%. The proportion surpasses pre-war Nazi Germany, 19%, as well as U.S. imperialism, even at its periods of conducting wars of aggression in Korea, 15%, and Vietnam, 10%. Why are you laughing, big dog?
Because it's so unnecessary to compare them to the Nazis, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
it's so unnecessary.
Pre-war,
yeah.
Pre-war
You
Germany.
have a big military budget. That means you imperialist.
Like,
I don't know. Is maybe the Soviet Union having to do with the entire fucking planet effectively trying to destroy its revolution? I don't know what to tell.
Yeah.
What the hell do you think?
So
Of course, they're
it's
gonna have
like,
a big military budget. They have a lot of ops, brother.
yeah.
it makes me
And
laugh because it's like pre-war Nazi. You mean no shit, it would be lower, and that's before they
Right.
fought the apocalyptic war that effectively was the end of the world. Like, what are you saying? But okay,
well, the thing is, they're not wrong as pointing this out as a problem.
right.
It
Yeah, but it's
became
not a
a
problem they
huge
can really
problem.
deal with. Like, it's
Right.
not something that they can fix.
Well, it was
Like-
it was something they because a lot of the opportunists came out of the military. It was a big problem. It was Zhukov is a stout
number
fighter, for the Soviet military as he was basically the enforcement arm of Khrushchev's clique. He helped politically consolidate all of Khrushchev's nonsense. So the military industrial complex building up in the Soviet Union was itself a contradiction that played out against the Soviet Union. But again, it wasn't just Soviet imperialist ambitions. It was also again, they're missing the dialectic here. There was also an external enemy that was forcing the Soviet Union to have to certainly, build itself up to defend itself. And also there was a class character within the Soviet Union that was certainly utilizing this necessary buildup for their own interests. So it's never just, one thing.
Yeah.
Right. Now the outcome
It's just like
wind up
it's
shit,
just
but
it just feels so like I'll put it like this, like, yes, you can comment on it, and yes, you can be like, this is bad. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But if
Right.
you're like, and this is why the Soviet Union are imperial, like, what do you mean? Like, how are you comparing them to Nazis and US imperialists as if
Yeah.
the USSR is like invading fucking all these random countries? Like, they have a large
And-
military because they are technologically behind in arms. One. They need a lot of people because there's a lot of people that would be invading them. And two, they need to be building nukes because the people that are their ops have nukes and better nukes than they do. So of course they need better nukes. Hence, more money to invest in better nukes. Like, I don't. What do you mean? What do you expect them to do?
No, brother. No, brother. No, brother. The West has never given a reason for the Soviet Union to be so defensive. Anyway, let's keep reading.
Yeah, we got to get through this so you can go to bed because we're only like a third.
It ain't no bed, bro. I gotta go back to work.
Damn.
Yeah, bro. I told you I was just mad busy today. All right. In order to serve its imperialist ambition, no, we already read that. The Soviet military itself is immense. It has 4.2 million personnel in active service, almost twice the number of the U.S., and has another $25 million in reserves. It has close to 800 submarine-guided nuclear missiles and over 1,600 land-based ICBMs. Its naval forces are close to, if not surpassing, those of the U.S., and has close to 500,000 men occupying countries in Eastern Europe. These military forces are not to fulfill the defensive needs of a socialist country, but rather are the forces of a mighty imperialistic superpower aiming for domination of the world. Ugh.
I just want to point out that they said occupying countries in Eastern Europe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Instead of, these members of the Soviet Union. But
Instead of, having soldiers in an area specifically to hold the front line and they're in the event that there's a surprise attack. Like,
Yeah, which had happened, Project Gladio, and there was all sorts of nastiness going on. So yeah, it's certainly at best it's a horrible misreading of the situation in Eastern Europe as far as the military occupation went.
right. Some may ask if the USSR has any profit in its foreign expansion. It certainly does. It bleeds dry to Eastern European countries, just as the U.S. does in Western Europe. The USSR is also aiming to make money in a third world. It is establishing joint stock companies that are no different from the U.S. monopoly capitalist corporations. From its so-called foreign aid and arms deals too, the Soviet Union makes huge profits. The Soviets use foreign aid as an imperialist tool just as does the U.S. bourgeois. The chairman of the State Foreign Economic Relations Committee of the Soviet Union, Skachov, bluntly stated that the Soviet economic existence is no charity, that the technical assistance of the Soviet Union into the developing countries has served to promote the growth of our foreign trade and increase our equipment export. That this has added to the possibility of meeting increasing requirements of the Soviet national economy. In other words, the purpose of Soviet aid is not to assist the developing countries, but to help propel Soviet capitalist needs. This is clearly seen in terms of Soviet foreign aid. Soviet loans, for example, must first of all be used to buy Soviet machinery and equipment, usually at the price 20 to 30% higher than in the world market. Furthermore, products turned out by the Soviet-aided projects must first be used as debt repayments, usually at the price of 10 to 15% lower than the world market. Therefore, a Soviet loan can often produce a huge profit, 4.5 times more than the original loan. By that time that India has cleared all its present debts to the Soviet Union, Indian journalists estimate that she would have paid back 565.9% of her original loan.
Yeah.
Soviets have also conjured up elaborate imperialist theories to justify their exploitation of other countries. Brezhnev propounds that all countries should take part in the international division of labor, which means that the Soviet Union, which is developing the material basis for communism, builds industry, while other countries subordinate themselves to the Soviet economic plan. Brezhnev, the triumph of the Soviet democracy, this amounts to industrialized Russia and undeveloped Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Soviets have also have rationales to interfere and subvert national liberation struggles. They humbly proclaim that it is universally recognized that without the assistance of the USSR, the national liberation forces would not achieve success. We are dealing with then is the USSR as a superpower under the mask of socialism. The revisionist leaders of the CPSU run state monopoly capitalism and exploit the working people both at home and internationally while aiming at the world hegemon. Thoughts before we keep going?
So let's contrast this situation that was going on in the 60s and 70s. So this is a problem. This shows where a material basis for wealth for a burgeoning and developing capitalist class is coming from. Right? These loans were predatory, no doubt about it. You can contrast them with the Tanzania-Zambia Railway that China had begun construction of in 1970. There's CIA documents that say that the People's Republic of China during that era, which was supplying labor and materials for help in these areas, especially in Africa, Tanzania, and Zambia, the CIA said that there's no way that we can beat these loans. Nobody in the capitalist world can beat these terms. So China around this time was showing what a real genuine socialist project would look like in foreign aid versus the Soviet Union, which was, I wouldn't call them fully, capitalist restored, but this is, they were correct in recognizing that this was one of the material outlets for creating a new capitalist class that was burgeoning, and part of that was this predatory loan structure that they had implemented during the Brezhnev era, for sure.
I mean, I would want to see exactly, and they, again, like you said, they're obviously predatory. But I would want to see who they're being predatory to specifically, because India at the time was not like another socialist state. They were run by the bourgeoisie. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And if you're giving a loan to the bourgeoisie of another state, and you're ripping them off, I don't really see it as being that awful or really I guess imperialist if you're just basically making capitalists of another country pay you, more. You know what I mean? Because that money isn't necessarily going back to the workers of India anyways. You know what I mean?
Correct. But it's not so much about the where they were extracting the wealth from like the Indian workers. It's that they were extracting all of this profit it's creating profit that goes into this burgeoning capitalist class.
Yeah. I'm saying like in this circumstance, like I don't necessarily see it as like a bad thing as far as it goes as like internationally. You know what I mean? It's not good either, and it definitely does end up developing their domestic capitalist class. But I could see this happening in a situation where there is no domestic capitalist class, and they would still be doing this anyways. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily see it as like the action itself, more so the who would be going to. You know what I mean? The profits as it were.
Yeah, I mean it's just the problem with it is it clearly shows we have the burgeoning capitalist class going through here, and they're doing all of this not to develop the Soviet Union. They're doing this to make the people who have their hands on the lever at this point, the party officials, the capitalist elements that still exist there. It's being done to make them richer. It's not to help develop India. It's not done to help develop the Soviet Union. It's just making a few people richer in the Soviet Union. It was one of the key sources of their what wealth they were able to extract, because they weren't doing as much of it at home.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Cutie. How it wouldn't really affect, at least theoretically, like the proletariat or the peasantry class, and like say India, but
right. It's
the apparatus itself allowing for people within the Soviet.
It's a capitalist it's a capitalist social relation. It's
right.
Clearly.
Yeah, it's capitalist social relation in this almost in the same sense as we talked about earlier, where it's a proletarian state held firm that ends up giving wages to its workers. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, the state is still doing capitalism. You know what I mean?
Right. All right. The significance of the restoration of capitalism in the Soviet Union to the present world situation. The restoration of capitalism in the Soviet Union has serious implications for the people of the world. The Soviet Union is a big country with a large population and has a highly developed economy with international connections. It is more than a capitalist state, for it is one of the two superpowers of the world in contention with other superpower, the U.S. It strives to gain domination over all other countries and nations, including lesser capitalist states. The two superpowers are the enemies of the people of the world. The world's people have already seen how a superpower operates. Following World War II, the U.S. became the number one exploiter and oppressor of people everywhere. It attacked the Third World and bullied even its own allies, such as Japan and Western Europe. Objectively, a broad united front could be forged, which included the international proletariat, masses of people in the U.S., the socialist countries, the oppressed nations of the world, and even lesser capitalist powers. But the rise of the Soviet Union as a superpower alters this situation. It is only correct now to see foregoing a broad united front against most superpowers, which must include all various countries fighting for independence, nations for liberation, and people for revolution. The proletariat must support whatever is in the interest of the masses of the world's people and help to defeat the imperialism of both superpowers. This means that the proletariat must support activities such as the liberation movement of the African people, as in Azania and Zimbabwe, and condemn the direct interference of the Soviet Union in Angola, where they incited a tragic civil war. Several months after the end of the Civil War, the Soviet Union continued to support over 10,000 mercenary troops on Angolan soil. Proletariat must also support those activities of third world countries to defend their national independence and strengthen their economic position. For these struggles to help isolate and weaken the two superpowers, we support Egypt's decision to throw out the Soviets from their country, as well as oil exporting countries' attempts to control their own natural resources. Action should be encouraged to such as the Iranian government's attempt to make the Indian Ocean a zone which could prohibit U.S. and Soviet atomic weapons in the area. There are also contradictions between the lesser capitalist countries and superpowers. The attempts of these countries to develop their ties with the Third World suggest the recent UNCTAD conference are positive steps towards breaking away from the domination of superpowers. At the same time, the recent interference of both superpowers in the internal affairs of countries such as Portugal and Italy should be exposed. People's revolutionary struggle for self-determination, national liberation, and socialism are every day winning more and more victories and must be resolutely supported. Brother.
I think particularly very extra the part where they're talking about Angola actually kind of like drives me bananas, to be honest. Because they're calling them mercenary troops, but who are said mercenary troops? Cubans. Cuban soldiers. They're good. Like, what do you mean, mercenary troops, brother?
Right. Yeah, it's.
And the Soviet Union really didn't initiate that war.
Yeah, it was a civil war because Portugal pulled out of Angola.
Yeah.
And there was UNITA and the MPLA. And the MPLA were Marxists whom Cuba and the Soviet Union supported in their civil war, in the same sense that the West, capitalist nations, supported UNITA. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why are we later on in this talking about, how the Soviet Union is, the worst, when in this situation, in almost all the situations that we end up talking about here, right, that they bring up, is not necessarily them taking the initial action. It's them actually taking action to counter literally what the United States has done first. You know what I mean?
Right. Obviously, they should just be the enlightened centrists, Cutie. All right.
I think what they should do is, just let the USA do whatever the hell it wants, I guess. You know what I mean?
All right, brothers. I got 20 minutes. So I'm going to speed run. I'm going to read to the end.
I mean, we can cut it off here if you want, and then we can, throw this in later on something else.
Yeah, let's. This is still a long way to go.
We still got like 3 sections.
Let me finish off the end because I too am getting tired.
Okay.
Okay. This is the most ridiculous part. This is where it really goes downhill.
Okay.
Both superpowers are enemies of the world's people. Soviet Union most pernicious. Shut up.
Smack.
L. Seriously. Both superpowers are enemies of the world, and both are vicious and bloodthirsty exploiters. Good God. At the same time that we oppose both superpowers, we must recognize that of the two, the Soviet Union is the even more pernicious foe. Fuck off. Why is this? The Soviet Union relative to the U.S. is a rising imperialist power. The U.S. suffered irreversible defeats in Indochina. Irreversible, huh? Yeah. It is Jesus Christ. It is being forced to retreat all around the globe. Where? Where? The Soviet Union, on the other hand, is even more aggressive and ambitious. It hopes to fill everywhere where the U.S. leaves or is weakened. At home, the U.S. is beset with monumental economic, social, and political difficulties. It finds little support for its imperialist activities. If I only wish. The Soviet Union is also internally weak. It is meeting more and more resistance from the people of the Soviet Union. That's not, if only. In the economic field, it is still weaker than the U.S., but it has the advantage of state monopoly capitalism, which can more directly use for its aggressive plans. It imposes a fascist dictatorship on the people at home to prevent any opposition. This is horseshit. The Soviet revisionists have
this one is crazy.
Have put millions of Russians into concentration camps and mental asylums. What? To crush opposition to fascist rule. The director of Soviet internal security himself admitted that we're over 600 scientists in his bureau whose purpose is to find out new ways to physically and psychologically suppress the people. The Soviet Union, furthermore, is social imperialist superpower. It masquerades under the cover of Marxism and socialism and pretends to be an ally of revolution, but nothing could be further from the truth. The U.S. is like the thug on the street whom you know wants to beat you over the head to get your wallet. The Soviet Union is a backstabbing friend who waits to get into your home to steal your food.
That's crazy, bro.
My God, someone get this motherfucker medicated. This is okay. First off,
Ableism?
yes, I'm going to be ableist here.
See, Larry, bro. This is why This is what caused me to start tweaking out about Maoists. This made me start going
Oh
crazy.
no doubt. This is ridiculous. But this is before Maoism was actually fucking.
This is like fucking third worldism right here.
Yes, this is third worldism. This is before Maoism was consolidated as a theory.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Irreversible defeats in Indochina. My God. Yeah, they got kicked out, but after they destroyed the fucking place, retreat all over the globe. Where did they retreat? They're everywhere, and even in the 70s, like, and okay, at home the U.S. is beset with monumental economic, and this is true. It was beset with, we're going through superinflation at the time. Whip inflation now. I'm too young to remember that, but it finds little support for its imperialist activities. Are you fucking kidding me? There's never been a more bootlicking population in the world as we've found in the post-World War II United States fucking population. Even during the Vietnam War, it was still a very popular resistance, but still most of the people were still bootlicking.
Yeah.
God.
But I wanted to, I think, have, I guess, some of these Bukharin stuff to set up for, because I wanted this to be kind of like a very bigger conversation that inevitably goes into a discussion about, China, right? Because that's the fucking thing that everyone and their grandma wants to talk about and complain about all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Because, Bukharin is the economist of the Soviet Union at the time, effectively, right? He was like the main guy, and he wanted elements of capitalism in the economy to develop it, right? And people talk about China in particular with Deng Xiaoping and how he did the same thing, right? And allowed capitalism, right? So have that, and also obviously this, I like to kind of like, I guess, almost like give us flashbacks, almost like flashbacks of things we're hearing today about China.
Right.
And we can get a background of what imperialism is, a background on what socialist states do when they do capitalism, especially in the Soviet Union, and we can also get an idea of where things are different than they are now, or maybe they're the same exact situation, which is impossible. But I think we're all set because I kind of don't want to read any more of it. But
no, that's, I mean,
yeah, my back hurts from sitting like a shrimp all day these last two streams.
Bro,
that's why I've had my camera off, bro, because I've been like bending over.
I have this pillow basically to make it so my back doesn't hurt, and the section that my back was on was like almost wet. I just touched it and I was like, ah.
With my flavor of tism, right? Like I understand that like you're supposed to sit in a chair like this, but like it's so like not natural for me. So like I have to. It looks
weird on the camera too.
On like the edge of the chair, you know what I mean? And then like the table I was using in the other room is really low to the ground. So like I really like was like sitting like this basically for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But anyway, Maoist or world positionism is ridiculous to say that whatever happened, and plenty of bad shit happened in the Soviet Union, but you cannot, with your whole chest, say the Soviet Union was worse than the United States. It just, that is materially incorrect. Incorrect.
I wonder, like, I would like a follow-up with
who wrote this?
Ework Quinn, if they're still with us. Like,
it's an organization. So
is it?
Yeah, it was like a
send an email, brother.
Who actually wrote this though?
I don't know. I think it was their organization writing it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like somebody wrote it for their organization, but it's just from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Well, whoever wrote it, get them on here. It'd be funny as fuck if it was like, now they're like working at like a hedge fund or something, and they love Bernie Sanders and
maybe we can
Yeah.
meet our
China's the worst enemy or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. All right, homies. I think we did it. I'm tired of yapping. I'm gonna yap. I probably won't yap at all on Saturday, as I'm big sleepy.
All right. Good night, big dog. Good night.
Goodbye, my gumdrops.
Goodbye, everybody.
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 End the show. Everybody.